Hello and welcome back. Hello. Hello. I love you. Love you. Don't you look at my face? No. No. Hello and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. Oh yeah. Don't worry, good girl. Hello and welcome back to the Arcane Forge. My name's Josh. This is Bella, the DM dog. And last week we managed to reach 1,000 subscribers on the Arcane Forge channel. I thought it'd be a nice idea if we did a question and answer session, just in case there was anything that you wanted me to talk about that I wasn't already going to cover. I asked you guys what you wanted to know about me and about the Arcane Forge, about what I do here in the discussion section on my page. I mentioned it in one of my videos and I put it on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter as well, and you came back with oodles of questions which I will now attempt to answer. I couldn't quite get to all of them, so maybe we'll do another question and answer session later on. So if you have other questions, just let me know and we can maybe do another question and answer video. Make sure to just put in brackets video question so I know to answer it in a video rather than jump into the comments and answer it there. But anyway, let's get started with the video and with your first question. So it's all a work in progress on Instagram and TK Dean on YouTube both wanted to know about how I got started in D&D. Specifically, you said, when did you start playing D&D and what motivated you to start playing? Well, I first started playing D&D when I was in school. I think that's the case with a lot of people. I used to spend a lot of time when I was in school drawing. I used to go to the library in my school and I would just sit at one of the tables and draw endlessly during my lunch hour and sometimes after school and before school, and yeah, basically just drawing forever. And when I was maybe between 11 and 13, something like that, people kept coming into the library to look at me drawing and they would ask if I would draw their characters for them in this game that they were playing called D&D that I had never heard of. As they described their characters to me, because I just wanted something to draw and I was happy to do it, I started getting really excited about the stories that they were talking to me about and what their characters were like. So I decided to kind of check it out. They kept inviting me, so I decided to check it out. And there was just this one classroom once a week where one of the guys in the last year of school, which we call sixth form in England, don't call that the same thing in Scotland. I can't remember what they call that in Scotland. Either way, I was living in England at the time, and sixth former was a final year person, and he was the DM. He was running a campaign for a bunch of people to play, and I thought it was really mystifying, it was really interesting. Unfortunately, when he then graduated, you know, when he left school, it was up to us to start our own adventure, the people who were playing in that, and none of us could quite coordinate as well because we were a little bit younger, we found it a little bit more difficult. So eventually our group split up and I didn't actually end up playing D&D again until I moved up to Scotland when I was 18 to go to university. And I made friends with a writer from the States who kept begging me to get into D&D, come and join him in his campaign. And I had university, I was really busy and I kept saying no and I kept saying no until eventually when I finished university, I kind of relented and just thought, you know, why not give it a try? It's been so long, I can't remember what it was like. And there was absolutely no comparison between the kind of campaign that a writer could come up with when they're an adult and the kind of campaigns that you were coming up with when you were a kid. I was just hooked. I was in from there on out every single day. I was thinking about role-playing. I was thinking about my characters, who I wanted to make, what I wanted to build. I just couldn't stop, and I absolutely loved it ever since then. It opened a lot of doorways. It opened a lot of friendships to me with other people who played this game. And eventually I just found a home for myself among people who play this. And I've not looked back since. So on to the next question. A few of you have asked about how I do my drawings. I want to know a little bit more about it. In particular, TP Nomad asks, from YouTube that is, I would love to know more about your drawings, things like how you started, what tools you use, like what tablet and what software you use, and what would you recommend for people who want to get started drawing. So I have been drawing for as long as I can remember. I never really had a moment when I kind of thought I wanted to pick up a pen and paper and start drawing. It's always been a part of my life. My mum is really into watercolor painting. She's a very, very artistic person. She's very talented. And she passed that on to me and my brother. My brother ended up becoming an art teacher. So he's probably the better person to field this question now I think about it. But either way, I've been drawing for as long as I can remember. But I think something else that really impacted on it as well was comic books. My dad was hugely into comic books when he was young. He collected all the sort of, you know, X-Men #1 and all this kind of stuff when he was a kid. And he always tells the story that unfortunately when he came back from school, he went home to look at his old comic book collection and found out that his mum had sold most of them. So as a result, he found the ones that she had not sold, which were unfortunately none of the really, really cool, ancient, really important ones like #1s or anything like that. But he held on to all of those, onto the rest of his collection, and took them home and saved them. And then when my brother and I were old enough, he took them down out of the attic and gave them to us to read. And that was a massive moment for me. I struggle a lot with dyslexia and also with ADHD, which is not a great combination for reading. I love stories, I love fantasy, as you know, but dyslexia makes it quite hard to read, and then ADHD makes me not really want to, because I get bored so quickly. I want to do the next thing, so sitting down and allocating time specifically to reading is problematic. But a comic book with loads and loads of different panels, lots of short dialogue and lots of artwork kept me enthralled. So from there on in, I was obsessed with comics. They were my avenue into storytelling, and with that came a lot of looking at art and looking at artists. And over the many, many years that I was obsessed with comic books, me and my brother would always talk about sort of what artists we thought were amazing at certain things, and sort of theory crafting, like, oh, wouldn't it be amazing if you got this artist and this writer together on a project? That'd be so good. And I realized what we were doing was looking into the artist's style. We were sort of analyzing and dissecting why we thought a certain writer or a certain artist would be good for a certain story or for a certain character. We would look at people's line work, we would look at how they decided to do shading, we would look at their coloring, we would look at their inking, how detailed, how stylized someone's work was. We were really, subconsciously through entertainment, learning huge amounts about what we valued and what we didn't value in art. And so when I just carried on drawing, I thought, oh man, I really like this part of this person's style. I'm going to try and replicate that in what I'm drawing. And little by little, I ended up developing kind of amalgam of lots of little bits that I really enjoyed. Some things I could never dream of achieving. And there was a really long period when I was in school when I was obsessed with sort of manga and anime. I was a really big Dragon Ball Z fan, and I bought all of these books on how to draw manga, and they kind of taught me the idea of thinking about how something operates in terms of individual shapes, which worked really well for me. I tend to think of things very much in 3 dimensions at all times. So having the idea of, you know, there's a ball socket in your joint, thinking about the sphere that's in there, thinking about a face as a series of shapes. So it's sort of like there's a ball here, and then there's kind of like this shovel shape here for a chin, give or take. You have 2 little spheres here for eyes, little rectangle for a nose. All of that helped me to visualize how to construct someone, and then if I wanted them to show a certain emotion or to be moving in a different way, it wasn't hard for me to think about how I would move those shapes in a 3-dimensional space and then just draw over the top of whatever I was imagining. I actually don't hugely like anime or manga anymore, but the one thing I took away from manga that I really liked was the ability to kind of look at something and imagine where shadows would be cast, and to use your lines sparingly to define where those shadows were, instead of necessarily showing specifically where you would outline something in like a Western comic book. So for example, in manga, all those razor sharp noses that they have, like shark kind of fins or whatever, I learned to think about that as, you know, this is where shade would fall on the side of a nose. This isn't the nose that you're looking at itself, things like that. So I interpreted that with my style quite a lot. So you'll often find, like, if I'm drawing like a nose, I'll only ever draw like one side of a nose, and your brain can kind of fill in the other side, things like that. And gradually, little by little, the process of me learning to draw has just been me looking at stuff that I really like, trying to analyze why exactly I like it, and then taking what I like from that thing and trying it out in my own style and seeing if it adds anything to it, if it improves my work, if I think I enjoy that style more. And if it doesn't, then I leave it. But then equally, the other thing that you have to think about is, are you comfortable in that style? Because drawing, it's not like going to the gym. Like, you're not going to be like, oh, I'm never satisfied, I'm going to have to keep going back forever kind of thing. You kind of do have to end up being satisfied with your drawings. I mean, no matter what, if you look at your drawings about 5 years down the line, you're going to regret, oh my god, there's so many things wrong with this. Everyone does that. But you have to feel comfortable in what you draw. As for what I use to do drawings, I use an old Wacom Bamboo, and I use a Mac here with Photoshop version CS5, all of which was lovingly donated by my girlfriend. She is a graphic designer, and she used to work from home when she would use all this stuff on a regular basis, and she found a really wonderful job where she gets to do that in-house now, so she doesn't use it anywhere near as much, so we share it basically. The process for drawing for me definitely sort of mimics the style that I am comfortable with. I'm really new to Photoshop. I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with that, so I basically think about Photoshop as I would if I'm doing an analog kind of drawing, which is what I was doing literally until about a month before starting this channel. So again, very bare bones, but I'll get to grips with it fairly soon. That'll take some time, but generally what I tend to think about when I am drawing in Photoshop is using layers as layers of drawing that I would do. So as I say, my style is really influenced by comic books, and in comics what they tend to do, what they tended to do when I was a teenager at least, is that they would have one pencil artist who would kind of sketch everything out and then, you know, finalize their drawings in pencil. The pencil artist would hand that to an inker who would then use inks to kind of go over the top of that, make it far more clean and clear for other people to see. Then a colorist might do something called flats, which is when they would just do flat colors, and underneath that in a semi-transparent layer, more often than not, there would be someone who would kind of shade things. So I tend to do about the same thing as I would with an analog page, in that same sort of style, in that I make multiple layers of varying opacities. It's hard to think about. I might do another video on this because this is going to be a really long one. But that's the basics. Basically, I use Wacom, I use Photoshop CS5, I use a Mac, and I try to think about my drawings as I would have done when I was drawing in pen and paper. Hopefully that gives you somewhere to start. But otherwise, draw the way that you feel comfortable. Look at artists that you really enjoy. Try and analyze what it is about their art that you really like. Try and add it to your style, or reshape it and reinterpret it to add it to your style. If it doesn't feel comfortable, if it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Because at the end of the day, comfort is more important than trying to make something look amazing. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. But you'll develop a style over time, and just keep trying. I hope that helps. Ace Game Reviews asks what the worst TPK I've ever experienced or dealt out has been, either as a DM or as a player. And you know what? I have never actually dealt out a TPK, certainly as a DM, although I've come really close a lot of times. In fact, I've also never experienced a TPK as a character, which is weird now I think about it. I remember when I first started playing when I was a little bit older, and I made a wizard, and I didn't realize that when you cast things like a fireball, that the area that it affected didn't necessarily only affect bad guys. I didn't realize that it affected good guys too, and I remember being the only spellcaster in a campaign and basically flinging a fireball at the entire rest of the party, some of whom did die, and I made it my character's life quest to bring them back from the dead. It wasn't super popular that day. More recently though, in an adventure that I was running only a few months ago, I nearly killed my entire party with a trap as a DM. They had to fight these giant elemental golems that activated as soon as they entered a room, and there were a few potions on the ground that basically negated the elementalness of some of them. They had a few different potions, and basically if there was I think it was a fire golem, an ice golem, and a stone golem, and there was kind of a potion for each of those. They were to figure out basically if they threw one of these potions at the golem of the same type, it would get stronger, but if they used like ice on fire, for example, it would like diminish its strength, and if they used fire on stone, it would like melt the stone and stuff like that. It was something like that. Either way, my party decided to drink them because they were potion bottles, and I hadn't really thought this through. I should have said flasks or grenades or literally anything that indicates you should throw that, rather than potion bottle, which indicates you should drink that. And as a result, my party decided to drink all of the potions, taking various forms of damage, and then there were no potions left because they decided after they had drank the fire potion and it nearly killed them, there was still another fire potion, because I thought, you know, make a couple in case they goof. And they thought, no, we obviously didn't do that right. I just needed to pass a different check or something, so I will drink the other fire potion. And then they were locked in a room with potions that were burning them to death, and they had no way of replicating the potions, so there were also 3 giant golems in the room. And I hadn't really foreseen a way out of that. None of them had any stone shaping abilities, so they couldn't get out of the room. That was pretty much death for them. I ended up having to kind of rejig things a little bit so that they could essentially use the golems to get out of the room, if that makes sense. But yeah, that was about as close as I've ever come to killing my party, and it wasn't through a heroic deed or anything like that. It was through bad explanation on my part and for nearly trapping them in a dungeon room for all eternity. That would have been a really interesting campaign to see through to the end. Mr. Crowley on YouTube asks, how do you as a DM decide the number needed to beat a skill check? So I tend to do the pretty standard, something's around about a difficulty 5 if it's really easy for you to do. If something's, you know, just like average to do, you know, you don't have to be skilled in that field per se to attempt to do it, then I would make that like a difficulty 10. If something's like of medium difficulty, I'll say that's like a difficulty 15, and going up in increments of 5 basically until you reach about 30, which is nearly like really close to impossible to do. You'd have to be, you know, using gauntlets of ogre power to be beyond a normal human level of strength in order to lift that thing that you're trying to lift. But equally, if I'm trying to give away clues, if I'm doing like perception checks and investigation checks, I tend to wait to hear what my party has rolled, and if they are close to what I think the difficulty rating for that thing should be, I will tend to give them some information. So for example, if the difficulty rating to detect that the Baron is summoning his guards with a silent button under the table. Let's say that's difficulty 15. Okay, you can see that his arms shaking, and you know he's calling for help. If you get a 10, so it's not enough to actually pass, I would probably say you can see that the Baron's really panicked, and you can see that his shoulder's moving quite a lot. So it might indicate to the players that they want to ask questions about that, like what's going on. If they get a 5, I might say the Baron looks really panicked. You know, so I'd give them a little bit of information, getting more and more information the closer they are to succeeding the skill check, if that makes sense. So I don't want to say like, oh, you just flat failed, he looks totally normal. If you get a 14, you know, there's no point in doing that. But you know, the closer they get, because you want to progress the story. Ideally, you want to give them some hints as to what's going on. In my mind, I tend to set everything at about a 15 if it's worth having a difficulty rating, because you know, if it's 10 or under, if it's easy or under, I tend not to do difficulty ratings for things. So I mean, you never know though. It might players might surprise you with really, really terrible rolls. So yeah, generally speaking, I have in my head something akin to 15 as where I start with a difficulty rating. If it's sort of a little bit easier than that, like, you know, you're picking a lock, but you've picked locks before, then I might make it a 13, that kind of thing. But yeah, good question, good question. Joe Gilday on Instagram asks, if you could have any D&D magic item IRL in real life, what would you have? Which is a really tough call. One. I don't know whether to go for like a movement one, because like the Helm of Teleportation or Slippers of Spider Climbing, awesome. But then there's things like the ring of animal influence, like talk to animals as much as you like, and do like animal friendship. Also, it's pretty useful if you're out in the wild and like you're gonna get attacked. You can do fear on like a bear or something, which there's none of in Scotland. But I want to be able to talk to dogs. Although there's the wand of polymorph, which would be amazing fun. I get really frustrated, like, you know, Christmas shopping and stuff like that. In Edinburgh as well, once a year we have this thing called the Edinburgh Festival, where people come from all over the world, and the city is so small it can't accommodate the massive influx of people who come here, because it's like really good for comedy and for drama and all this kind of stuff. And being unable to get through crowds really annoys me. So if you could like turn people into really small creatures so that you can get through, is evil. Would I have evil alignment? It would be really funny if someone's being a real pain to just like turn them into something really adorable and silent as well. Would be really cool. But no, I think let's play it safe and let's say the ring of animal influence. So at the very least, then you could just become like the most amazing vet ever. Like you can just ask all the pets to describe their problems to you so that you can fix stuff. And again, legion of dog friends. Evo Raised by Foxes on Instagram asks, what is your least favourite class to play? Tough call, because there's a lot of distinctions between like how are they to roleplay and how are they to play in combat. So the monk is like hands down my least favourite one to play in combat. I don't know if there's like a secret to playing the monk, or if there's something that I should be trying to collect as a monk that makes them more interesting to play in combat. You know, maybe there's some unearthed arcanas or something that I'm missing. Either way, I make terrible monks. I make really bad monks. They're really boring to fight in combat because they just like hit someone with a stick and then they get some really low damage punches, and like everyone's casting spells and doing all this interesting stuff. And if you don't pick one of the ones where if you pick one of the ones where you get to cast spells, then you miss out on some other really important stuff for a monk, and it seems like all their cool stuff happens quite late on. So in combat, I found them quite dull, but then I really like the idea of mindfulness, and I really like the idea of playing a character in-game who thinks about things really objectively and really neutrally. Yeah, I think monk. I think monk is my least favourite, but it's a tough call because it's still good. Just because I'm not good at it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a good class. But it's my least favourite. That's what you asked. The monk is my least favourite class to play. Bubbly Penguin, with 2 N's, on Instagram asks me, did you start out wanting to be a DM, or was the responsibility pushed on you? Well, no, I started off playing for a long time. And then there was a period in my life when I didn't play D&D for a while. And I wanted to meet some new people, so I thought start a random D&D group up. But it's much harder to start a group as a player than it is as a DM. So I thought I would give it a go. I would try and find some new people. I'd try and advertise for some players all around Edinburgh. And I would create my own campaign. This was just as 5th edition was coming out. So this is the 5th edition is the only edition where I've DM'd. There are other editions that I've played, but this is the only one that I've DM'd. And I found that the rules largely made sense. And with my experience as a player, it was grand. So I really enjoyed it. And then met all these lovely people who I play with still today, and yeah, I absolutely adored it. So no, I started off as a player. I found that I enjoyed being a DM more than I did as a player, but I certainly don't feel hard done by in that role. On that note, Meganon on Instagram asks, what's your favourite part of preparation for a session or a campaign? For a campaign, hands down, world building. I love world building. My mind is constantly working on new worlds and new ideas, new things I want to put in an imaginary world. I'm almost never grounded in reality in my thoughts. So it's great to be able to put that down on paper and to kind of give that to other people to experience. That's my favorite part of writing a campaign. From session to session, I think it's puzzles. I think I like coming up with puzzles. Not necessarily puzzles that will stump people. I don't want to make it really hard or anything like that. I've always been a really big fan of, you know, setting out scavenger hunts and dropping hints and clues for people. A lot of times when it comes to someone's birthday, if they're a loved one, then I will spend a lot of time rather than a lot of money making a scavenger hunt around their home or around the city, something like that, where they can find their gifts buried somewhere in the city, that kind of thing. And I like to do that in D&D as well. So Megan on, I really like to come up with puzzles. That's my favourite part of prep between sessions. And in terms of as a campaign as a whole, definitely world building. I like coming up with interesting worlds and lots of lore. So much extensive lore. Thank you for the question. Matthew Adkins on Facebook would like to know more about my recording setup, including what editing programs I use for videos, which is totally doable. So basically, when I was in university, I studied linguistics. Again, I mentioned the whole ADHD thing, right? I get bored really quickly. So I've never used that skill in the real world, but it taught me a lot about sound editing software, or at least a little bit. We kind of did some, you know what I mean? But it introduced me, let's say, that's the way to say this. It introduced me to a program called Audacity, which is totally free. You can just go and download it. I will leave a link in the description if I remember that. And I use Audacity to record my sound. I record my sound separately via a Blue Snowball microphone. And then I sync that up with my video recording. So I'm recording over there, and I'm also recording literally here on the microphone, right here. And sorry if that got really, really loud there. I am basically syncing up those two things at once. And Audacity basically just allows me to see the sound waves of my own speech. Then when I'm done actually recording those two things, I sync them both up, both the video and the audio, in iMovie. And whenever I tell anyone who asks this, what do you use to edit your videos? And I say iMovie, their reaction is always, ugh. So iMovie is obviously not very good, apparently. It seems fine for what I want it to do, but I understand that there are better programs out there. I'm still learning how to do this, and iMovie does what I need it to do. Although that said, does do that kind of thing, you know, like when you're in a Word document and you move an image and then like everything is just destroyed. I had that this week in iMovie when I was filming Monster Monday for the coming week. That's all fully recorded and edited and everything like that, except iMovie decided to delete some pieces of audio that I didn't want it to, and so I reclipped a lot of the audio, and then I tried to reinsert that back in to sync, and then when I did that, it just completely obliterated everything like a scattershot of audio, so that it's now in an entirely different jumbled order, and I have to figure out what the hell I was trying to say to reorder everything. So yeah, iMovie's maybe not great, but there are other things out there. It's what I use, it's free, and it's really simple to use. So if you're patient and you don't want to spend any money, it's good. As for the hardware that I use, I will show you. All right, so I use, I wonder if I can get this all in. Well, you're in my living room, and I use a 3-point lighting system, if you can see just here. On top of which I use, let's not blind you, this little ring light here. This Z bracket did not fit at all, so I had to break it to make it work, and yeah, it was cheap. So yeah, and then I have my laptop down here recording the audio. A little microphone just here. In terms of the camera that I'm using, it's a Canon 80D. With the lens that came with it. I use a macro lens sometimes if I can help it, if I'm using it to shoot miniatures or drawings or for just close-ups on my hands, but otherwise that's what we've got. And I hope that was an interesting window into my life and into Arcane Forge and everything like that. So again, thank you to all of you, all 1,000 of you as of last week. I think it's up to like 1,600 this week. So I might need to make another one of these soon. But yeah, thank you all so much for all of your support. and for your questions as well. This was really lovely. So if there are any more questions that you'd like me to answer, make sure to just leave them down below. And again, in brackets, maybe put video questions so I know you want me to do them as a video rather than just jump into the comments. Again, yeah, thank you all so much. Until next time, I will see you later.